Call the meeting to order. Town of Pittsboro Board of Commissioners regular meeting, Monday, April 10th, 2023. We do call this meeting to order. We can begin with a moment of silence and invocation, please. Thank you. Commissioner Farrell, if you would kind of lead us in the pledge.
Sure. Would everyone rise for the pledge? Pledge allegiance to the flag for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. Good to see you all this evening. We're going to begin with the swearing in of Police Officer Christopher David Oakley. If you would come forward, please, with our town clerk, Ms. Bailey.
I, Christopher David Oakley, do solemnly and sincerely swear that I will support the Constitution of the United States, that I will be faithful and bear true allegiance to the state of North Carolina and to the constitutional powers and authorities which are or may be established for the government thereof. And that I will endeavor to support, maintain, and defend the Constitution that said state and not inconsistent with the Constitution of the United States. That I will be alert and vigilant to enforce the criminal laws of this state. That I will not be influenced in any manner on account of personal bias or prejudice. But I will faithfully and impartially execute the duties of my office as a police officer for the town of Pittsboro, according to the best of my skill, ability, and judgment. So help me God.
And while she's doing that, welcome to the Pittsboro Police Department. We certainly appreciate your service. Thank you, Mrs. Bailey, and thank you, Chief Johnson. We certainly do appreciate that. Next, we're going to move forward with the adoption of the agenda. We'll let them go out first. Thank you all so much for coming. We appreciate it.
I'll make a motion to adopt the agenda with a change to move miscellaneous to the Boys and Girls Club update to next meeting on April 24th.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
So therefore, none are opposed. So thank you for that, for presenting that and adopting the agenda at this time. We're going to actually go into closed session. So we need a motion to do that.
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Thank you. So we're going to move to another room at this time. Cameras over there. Okay. We have returned from our closed session and now we're going to go forward with our agenda as indicated. Do we have any citizens to speak today? Thank you. Thank you, Mrs. Bailey. We do not have any citizens to speak, so we're going to go with our manager updates from Mr. Jackson.
Okay, thank you, Mayor Pro-Tem Baldwin. So just two quick things. So this past Saturday, there was a holiday event planned in downtown for a rabbit find event. And of course, it was rained out and we have approved for that to be rescheduled on April 22nd, Saturday, April 22nd. So that's a informational note. Also, with the downtown streetscape project, you know, one of the kind of lingering parts of that is the lighting. So staff has been working with DOT on that for a number of months. And that's about to come to fruition by April 27th. The new lights will be installed. You may have noticed in the circle, there are some foundations there. So there are 6 new street lights that will be installed on those foundations by April 27th. So, you know, the light will look different. Okay, we're accustomed to the kind of more dim kind of amber light with existing fixtures. These fixtures will be LED lights. And so it will be more of a brighter, cool type of lighting that you'll be seeing in that circle area by the end of this month. Then by the end of May, they will be completing the lighting project that will involve replacement of the other lights, the other street lights in the downtown area with the LED bulbs. So that will return us to kind of a uniform kind of light pattern. There will be that several week, couple of month period where it'll be a very bright lighting around the circle and the kind of warmer kind of amber light we're used to in the other parts of downtown. So.
Kent, while you're on the lighting, and I know it's been brought up numerous times, is there any way we can get any kind of pole light or anything down toward the mod at that very dark area right there between the annex building and the mod restaurant?
I'll say maybe. I've not looked into that, but staff will look into that.
I think one of those is going there on like on the corner of the annex building, but we'll see how much it helps.
Thanks.
Okay, yeah, we'll look into that.
And will these new LED fixtures have the 100% cutoff, so nothing going into the sky?
Morgan, do you recall the?
They've got like a cap on top of it that helps keep the lights going.
Good, thank you.
All right, thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. I do have one question about the lights. Okay, there's lights that are on the trees. Now, one is out at the pocket part. So one of those string of lights are out. Are those planning to be replaced?
I mean, we will make sure they are replaced. I'm not
Okay.
sure if there is a plan currently, but certainly if there's a deficiency, we'll make sure it gets addressed as promptly as possible.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Jackson.
Okay.
Thank you very much. We'll move on now to mayor and commissioner updates and concerns. As for me, I don't have anything to update you on. The affordable housing met, but I was unable to meet with them. That was the same day we had our retreat, which I was actually unable to attend that other than by Zoom. So I will go forward with Commissioner Bonitz. Do you have anything to?
Thank you. No, I do not have anything to report.
Oh, okay, thank you. Commissioner Farrell?
I will have a PVA meeting Wednesday. That's all I'm at right now. Thank you.
Thank you. Commissioner Shipp?
Sure. Just the next EDC meeting will be April 19th, and I'll attend that.
Thank you. Mr. Vose. Any public comment?
No.
Okay, thank you. Now we need to move forward with our consent agenda. We need a motion to either approve the consent agenda as indicated or a motion to modify.
Make a motion to approve?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Thank you very much. So now we have completed our consent agenda. We're going to go into public hearing. We need a motion to go into the public hearing.
So move.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Yes, we're going to do the Pittsboro land use update. Ms. Phelps, thank you.
Hey, good evening, everyone. My part is going to be brief as we have Jake Petrossi with Stewart Inc. here, who has a slideshow that he's going to present for you. So this has been a long plan that we've had to extend just a couple of times, and we are really excited to bring it to you. I hope you've all had time to look over the plan, come up with any questions that you might have had. We did answer some that were in the shared file for that was created for the plan. But with that, I'll go ahead and let Jake come up, and he's going to share his screen and present to you all.
Good evening.
Good evening.
Good evening.
Yeah, make it where I can share. Well, let me jump right in. Jake Petrossi with Stewart. Been working with Janie and staff on this for 8 or 10 months. Talk a little bit about the project analysis and input that we've had, and then some of the highlights from the plan. I do want to thank staff, Janie and Molly and Teresa and Steve as well, to everything they've done. Janie and Molly did a lot in terms of organizing steering committee meetings and helping with public involvement and reviewing everything. So I do appreciate them, and also the steering committee. They attended, had really good attendance at the meeting. Some of the meetings were quite long, lasting beyond a lot of time. There's a lot to talk about. The land use plan, we're looking 10, 20 years out, and a lot of really important issues with the town. So I do want to thank them as well. The land use plan is really meant to be long range. We're really looking at 10 or 20 years out. It does provide guidance from a land use perspective, intensity of development, design of development. It also is useful to help guide staff with their reports and recommendations, but it also can provide guidance for programs and infrastructure investment from the public side and also the private side of things. It is collaborative. It's something that hasn't happened in Pittsboro for a number of years. Needed to have a conversation about new things that the last plan was adopted in 2012. A lot has happened in the last 11 years. So it was important for us to do this. It is policy, it's not regulatory, but it can lay the groundwork for adjustments to regulations in the future. And community engagement was really important. We did have a survey as part of this. I heard from over 500 folks, had a public open house. The priorities that we heard from the survey from folks were improvement of utilities and infrastructure, environmental protection and conservation, preservation of character, and also growth management. Some of the plan goals that really meant to guide the recommendation: growing strategically, collaboration with partners, supporting a vibrant and energetic downtown, creating opportunities for placemaking, entrepreneurship, innovation, and arts, and that has a long history in Pittsboro, so we want to continue that. balancing the preservation of existing neighborhoods with the need to increase housing opportunities. That's something that we've heard a lot about. And protecting natural resources. It's also really important. So the plan has 4 elements. It's called a land use plan, but it really deals with other issues. It deals with housing, it deals with downtown and infrastructure and natural resources as well. So those are the elements. The land use plan has a future land use map that really is meant to show the pattern of development. Each color on this map represents different characteristics. I can get into each of these, but to kind of give you an overview orientation, in the center is downtown, surrounded by downtown support area. It's meant to be a kind of a flexible area that could be a mix of uses. The traditional neighborhood infill are areas where you have good proximity to either downtown or commercial or mixed use area. And then an important part that I'll touch on later is the non-residential or mixed use areas, the mixed use activity centers, and then also the employment mixed use areas in red and in blue, where you can see a variety of non-residential and some residential development in that mixed use activity centers. So that's kind of an overview. I'll talk a little bit about different pieces of this. The purpose of the future land use map, it provides general land use guidance. It does identify the intended development pattern and also areas where there's shared design features or scale or density. It is policy, it's not regulatory, but it can influence regulatory changes. It might be that after this plan is adopted, staff says, well, it would be easier to implement this plan if we change the zoning district or change the zoning this way. And we do specify some areas in the plan where that would be advantageous. What's it used for? It should influence development design. So you all should be looking at it, but also private development should look for this. It guides rezoning decisions. It is not absolute. You can't amend this plan. So if something comes before you all and you all think it's a great idea and you want to approve it, but it's not in line with this plan and it requires a rezoning, it might require a map amendment, but that's okay. It's kind of meant to be amended over time. It also guides infrastructure investment decisions. You know, that's an issue. You can't serve the world with infrastructure. So each character area explains the look and feel of the areas throughout town. I can kind of answer more questions about specifics. But it's important to note that each character area could have multiple zoning districts within it. So it's not meant to be all one zoning district, but it could have multiple ones in those characters. Kind of a bigger picture plan than zoning. A couple key recommendations in the land use and housing section. One is focusing growth near infrastructure and walkable commercial services. So that could be existing commercial or planned commercial. We talked a lot about walkability. It's really important to the steering committee and folks from the public that comment on this is to make Pittsboro more walkable. There's different ways to do that. We outlined some ways in the plan. It boils down to 3 or 4 or 5 Ds. So the 3 big ones are density. So the density of housing, uses, and diversity of uses as well. So, you know, if you have to walk from your house 10 miles away to go to a grocery store, you're probably not going to do that. You know, you might bike there, might get a few things on a greenway, but you're not going to walk. So diversity of uses. If I can walk to things nearby, different things that are destinations, I'm more likely to walk. Design is important. So design is as simple as sidewalks of adequate width, having shade, separated from traffic. Do you feel comfortable walking? But also how you design development. If I have to walk by 800 feet of blank wall, that's not the most pleasant walking experience. That's not going to engage me and move me along and encourage me to walk along that street. So design is important. Removing barriers to infill is something that we talked about a lot in terms of where new housing can go. And we actually make some specific recommendations in the plan about where you can integrate just a little bit more density and missing middle housing types in key areas. So missing middle is a term that's used to describe everything in between a single family home on a larger property and then a big apartment complex. There's a missing middle of housing types there that we used to build a lot of and haven't really built a lot of in a lot of our cities in North Carolina and the US really in the last 30, 40, or 50 years. So some areas in around downtown or existing or planned commercial areas are opportunities for that missing middle housing, those duplexes or quadplexes or even cottage homes, those sorts of things that can provide a little bit more density, but don't really change the character of the area too much. So also preserving character of existing neighborhoods is important with that. We have some great established neighborhoods and we want to preserve that character as well. These are just some pictures of different types of residential structures that people said they liked during the public meeting. So you see accessory dwelling units and mixed use buildings, up to about 3 stories or so, attached residential, alley loaded, and then mixed residential at a single family scale, like cottage or pocket neighborhoods, that sort of thing. So those are the kinds of things that we want to see where those can fit, and we have some recommendations in the land use plan about it. Industrial and employment areas, we have an employment mixed use area on the land use map, and it's important to note that existing industrial, commercial, and office land uses represent about 4% of the study area. That's an existing land use. That's what's on the ground now. We do have employment mixed use areas, which includes industrial uses and mixed use activity centers and some other mixed use areas like downtown support and town center. And all told, those areas, mixed use non-residential areas, make about 13% of the study area. So one of the things that we wanted to do is have a policy about encouraging a balanced tax base. And I think that there's an opportunity for us to grow our non-residential areas significantly based on that. And it also, the land use plan provides guidance on where commercial and industrial rezonings should be supported as a policy, LUH 6. Downtown was really important part of the land use plan. So a couple of recommendations are about updating the downtown vision plan, attracting new businesses, focusing on infrastructure upgrades, water, sewer, streets, the bones that can support your downtown. Importance of form-based designs, but also allow for innovation. That was something that was really talked about a lot. Pittsboro needs to allow for innovation. We don't want downtown or any area to really look the same as everywhere else in America. So allowing innovation, and then also thinking about new and improved public spaces. There's a lot of opportunity downtown. It's unfortunate that the county is moving their offices, but that does present an opportunity as well. Infrastructure, I think that was talked about a lot during the steering committee. We had a lot of conversations about sewer capacity and addressing that sewer capacity for new businesses and residential was the top priority that came out of all the steering committee discussions. So I would be remiss if I didn't reiterate that before you all. And how do we do that? Evaluating additional fees as necessary and utilize future land use map to estimate future demand for water and sewer. And conversations with other providers. Sidewalk, greenway, and trails are also important in planning for stormwater, particularly green stormwater infrastructure in different parts of town as we kind of retrofit development that may not have considered stormwater when it was originally designed. Another piece of infrastructure is the roadway network. Coordinating with the design of planned roadway projects with DOT would be important. Updating the town's comprehensive transportation plan, studying addressing intersection improvements, and looking to determine needs and right of way for future roadways, as shown on adopted plans are two big takeaways that need to come out of that CTP. NC 87, some recommendations and plan to study future improvements to better accommodate freight movement, and US 64, particularly business east and west of downtown, to focus on access management, improving aesthetics, and bicycle and pedestrian safety. So those are the needs improvement designations on that map. There was a conservation natural resources element. We did get a Partners for Green Growth grant from North Carolina Wildlife in order to do this element. And Brooke Massa was a wildlife biologist that act as a advisory role on the steering committee. In the conservation element, we identify priority natural resources and include recommendations to protect them. We're hoping that this is informational, and there will also be a story map, so interactive website that will have some of this information on it as well. A couple of the recommendations in the element is incentivize conservation design. And conservation design is just the approach to subdivision design that encourages the development footprint and growth and cluster the development away from environmentally sensitive natural resources. So encourage that and protect high quality habitat and water quality, improving, of course, stormwater regulations. We're also talked about in the plan, maintaining and create open space connections. So from downtown to the Haw River and also west are some examples of that, and encouraging the conservation of heritage trees and use of native plants in the development. We also have some natural resources conservation design target areas where we really want to encourage that conservation subdivision design. So there was a couple comments on kind of questions, comments. I'll do my best to kind of touch on them and move into the discussion. One is traditional neighborhood development wasn't defined. I think one change we could do is just insert a description of traditional neighborhoods and how TND is encouraged in certain areas on the character area page. There was a lot of discussion about, do we need an industrial designation on the future land use map? And we did talk about that at the steering committee level, and thought that the approach that we're taking with the employment mixed use areas that allows industrial development was adequate. But if you all wanted to discuss and add an industrial character, we could do so. A couple questions about transitions. One was about Chatham Forest. Should it be the same as Potterstone? And that's really something that we looked at, and it's a transition area. So it provides a transition from infill residential near downtown to more suburban residential. It's not likely to change, so it could really go either way. And then one question was, where do natural resources conservation target areas come from and what do they mean? You know, they came from a number of different data sets that looked at biodiversity, wildlife habitat, and previous work in the natural resources planning tools, and what they mean in different character areas. So in the residential area, the yellow area, it would be, you know, one density, and if it goes in the traditional neighborhood, it would be a little bit denser, but the same principles apply. So you're trying to still preserve some of the important natural resources. So really the overall density kind of varies based on whether it's an orange or yellow or light green area, but overall the principle is the same. But additional discussion is really needed to determine what UDO amendments are needed to define and incentivize conservation subdivisions with that.
Can we talk about some of those while I have them up? Okay. So I think particularly with industrial, like that's been a hot topic for us, what's currently zoned industrial, and, you know, some things going around industrial and things like that. So right now we do have a defined area, and we've got industrial downtown and in random places also, obviously, but I guess I'm concerned about not having a defined place for industrial, because I guess if someone comes and says, hey, this area, you know, let's say out on 64 Business, I guess that's like here, is sort of the same classification as what we have as currently industrial. So I guess what ability do we have to make a distinction between there, or particularly if somebody wants to develop an industrial space, how do I have any idea between all of the blue areas where the town wants me to put a light assembly, you know, building, for example?
So, I mean, a couple of things. So, I mean, you do have industrial zoning, like your M2 zoning, it's kind of your it's industrial zoning. You know, this doesn't change that. A lot of those M2 areas are in that employment mixed use area. So that would be a logical place is to locate it within the M2 area in the employment mixed use area. I think one thing that, you know, this does do is it does cover a lot of those M2 areas. So if you all see, you know, recommendations or developments proposals that try to change a lot of that, try to move, 100 acres from that M2 to residential, or, that, see that trend. That's a concern, because that is some of your only M2 areas. But a lot of that M2 area is covered in this employment mixed use area, and inside the employment mixed use area, industrial is listed as a use. So, I think that, the one of the downsides of doing an industrial district would be limiting the places a little bit further where industrial could go. Because right now, the way the approach we're taking, we have this employment mixed use area. Some of those areas are going to be better suited for commercial, just naturally, like the market's going to want to put commercial, or, that sort of thing there. But there's some areas that are going to be appropriate for industrial. And, how do you measure that? There's a policy, that LUH 6, that talks about where it's appropriate. Areas with historic and industrial uses, areas with limited conflicts with residential. So that does provide some guidance, and for staff, when it comes to a rezoning, to where it doesn't check those boxes, and it does provide some coverage. But of course, you could add an industrial district, but I think if we just shrink it to M2, we might be leaving out some areas that could be appropriate for industrial that we're not thinking.
Yeah. Okay.
I'll riff on that same question. Thank you, Commissioner Shipp. It is, as the future land use plan is proposed to be revised, is this getting us into trouble with the situation we had a few years ago, where a concrete plant was proposed immediately across the creek from a residential neighborhood?
Well, I think the plan would provide some guidance. If that's located in that employment mixed use area, it might be more appropriate than if it's located in a residential area. So hopefully that provides guidance. And even within that employment mixed use area, there is the policy recommendation about where it's appropriate. And one of the things it talks about is with limited conflicts with residential. Now that's subject to interpretation, but that's an interpretation that this board is, legislatively authorized to do if there is a rezoning involved. And that's completely within y'all's legislative power. If it's going from one district to an M2 district, then you'll have to make that decision, whether it's appropriate, whether the conflicts are substantial or limited, and what's the best, for that site, for the town.
Okay. Thank you.
And I think personally, I've asked some other questions about this too, like with this land use plan follows existing property lines, for example, but it's really an abstract concept for us to use, and for the public to use. The specifics are the actual zoning. So our sort of liability in this case is that whatever this says, this would be in use for rezonings, but whatever's zoned M2 right now, there can still be another concrete plant that goes in there. So I think it's a step beyond this of if we want to look at other places where we want to say we need to change some zoning to match the future land use plan, because this doesn't prevent more gas stations from downtown. It doesn't prevent a cement plant next to the current cement plant. It doesn't prevent any of that, except in the case of rezoning. So I think for the land use plan update, it's almost better to be more abstract for us to use as a tool, and for people to come ask about rezonings and what would be the case in that specific area. But this doesn't change the underlying issues with the current zoning that we have.
Yeah, there could be updates to allowable uses in your zoning code in certain districts that are needed. And that could be on the industrial side, that could be on your downtown overlay, which we suggest to kind of update and make sure it's accomplishing your goals for downtown. That could be on the residential side. You'll have some residential zoning that might prohibit some infill and good style development that would be appropriate on the edges of downtown that you might want to address. Same thing on the conservation side. right now, your conservation subdivision language and ordinance needs to be updated. So there's, you know, probably three, you know, 2 or 3 things that, you know, hopefully staff can work with planning board and bring to y'all to text amendments over, you know, the next couple of months in order to address some of those bigger things. But if there's other things that you feel are not working, then you can task them with it as well.
I guess, can you talk a little more broadly about, because I know like I've reviewed our current, the 2012 land use plan study, but we don't refer to that as much as we refer to the map itself. So there's a lot of really good content in this land use plan and, you know, specific points in each category and all those things. So can you just talk a little bit about how we might use this other than saying this property is here and it's yellow? So yes or no?
Yeah. I think one of the things, I mean, the map was a major part of this, is the update the map. I mean, the previous map, you know, looking back on it, it had some issues, right? we didn't really know where Chatham Park was or how big it was. And we, you know, we were able to, you know, fix that part of it. The roads are a work in progress, but at least we brought some, you know, kind of update what we think is more likely to happen there. As far as the actual the character areas and the different types of lane uses, that old plan really looked a lot like a zoning map. It was very detailed in terms of you know, character areas. This is we thought a little bit bigger picture. We're really thinking about not just what's out there, not really just what the zoning is either, but really what could go there. So our residential categories are kind of more driven by the character of the development and types, and it could have multiple different zoning districts in it. And the infill neighborhood or traditional neighborhood infill area, I think in your last plan was very, very small, very tight. We were really thinking bigger picture about how the residential areas work with planned mixed use activity centers and planned commercial areas and that sort of thing. So, you know, that piece of it is kind of new, but what we're really setting up for is what is Pittsboro's role in Chatham County? What is Pittsboro's role related to, you know, the housing shortage that we have? And fundamentally, you know, as long as sewer issues get worked out, I mean, you all have a role to play to accommodate new homes for all the, you know, new workers that are going to want to locate in Chatham County. And arguably, a lot of that should happen in areas that are most appropriate. And a lot of those areas are in Pittsboro, inside our city too. But Pittsboro has a big role to play. Kind of reverse some of the trends of what has happened in a lot of the ex-urban developments happening in Chatham County. So that infill neighborhood residential area is going to be really important. We could see, you know, it be a mix of housing types there with higher density things closer to the commercial areas and then transition more to single family. So that's a big part of that. The residential area is the area where we really think we can, you know, serve with sewer. So that yellow area is really looking at areas that already have sewer access or could have sewer access in kind of the short to medium term. There's some areas in the rural conservation design area that could also have sewer, or it could be on septic. So those areas are, you know, we have to answer some sewer questions and probably revisit the map in a few years to understand, okay, what parts of those rural conservation design areas really are going to be served with town sewer or are going to be either you know, lower density or some other solution. So that's kind of the 3 gradations of the residential, and then so that was really important. And the natural resource conservation target areas are kind of the really important places where we really want to incentivize conservation design. That doesn't mean we don't want any development there. That just means the type of development there, we want it to kind of preserve some open space and preserve some of those natural resources and cluster development away from it to the degree possible. So yeah, so some of those are some of the big things. Also, on the mixed use activity centers, a lot of those weren't on the previous plan. So this is really looking at all your centers, you know, the next 10 or 20 years. There could be an isolated use somewhere here or there. There's already some isolated zoning, commercial zoning here and there. But big picture, this sets up a framework for you to accommodate that growth over the next 10 or 15 or 20 years.
I'll keep going. So I had the question about really Potterstone and Chatham Forest and the vineyards. And I think if I, and I saw your comment about, they're not likely to change, which I agree with, but I think, you kind of mentioned one of the flaws of the previous plan is this is the current use and this is what it is, spread around. I think, one of the ways I might use this is say, well, if this neighborhood is orange, what are we thinking about? Let's go drive through that neighborhood and see what that might mean. And so, to me, if I drive through Potterstone and Chatham Forest and, those have a very similar, basically the same feel to them, which is different than the vineyards. Not that one is better than the other, but just, I would think Chatham Forest would be orange on this map as we're kind of driving around and seeing that. I recognize it's not going to change really, but I'm just curious about how it ended up yellow to use colors for simplicity.
Yeah, I think it, I think we were drawing this, and Chatham Forest is kind of a L-shaped.
Mhm.
So it's not like an entity, it's not like a gridded connected road network to where, Potterstone is kind of more of a, connected, extension of kind of really right on the other side of the creek downtown, right? So Chatham Forest is just by its nature, it's kind of linear in fashion. So it's hard for, you said it's a, neighborhood, but it could easily be orange, and that would be an easy map amendment. You can really make a justification either way. So if you all, wanted to make that change, you could, say approve the plan, but let's make that orange. And I think that's completely justified. I think that we spent a lot more time looking at places where there was change, potential for change.
Mhm.
So that's really on that north side. We were thinking everything this side of Chatham Forest, because there's potential for change, with Chatham Forest really being the bookend of that type of, downtown adjacent growth. So that's kind of a history, but, it's up to this board's purview as to what color you want it once it's adopted.
I guess I don't have a strong feeling on that. I was just trying to think of driving like the Churchwood neighborhood, drive through, it looks very different than the vineyards. So, how do we kind of guide that? So I guess for that reason, understanding it's not going to change much, I would like to, and it kind of fits.
So I'm going to tell you this. I think, so like Phillips Place is kind of what I think about as a traditional neighborhood in Phillips area, with, kind of a gradation of types of different housing and a defined, kind of center and transition. So that would be.
Sorry, did you say Powell Place or mean Powell Place? Okay, yes, yes, okay.
Not at all stuff.
Yeah.
Yeah, Powell Place.
Yeah, no, and I understand why Powell Place is mixed use activity center. I think that makes sense. It's closer there. It has mixed use throughout. So, okay. I don't know if others.
Yeah, I appreciate that line of questioning, and living in Chatham Forest, it is an intriguing question, and so yeah, it kind of puzzles me too, and so it makes me wonder what kind of observations would be drawn from that in future. So
I don't really see Potterstone or Chatham Forest changing a lot. I think it's
Agreed.
no, I agree, but in terms of the as Kyle said, the kind of the way that these neighborhoods would be viewed as models, or might be viewed, and their designation on this map being different, and yet being similar in form, it is a little bit, I don't know, is puzzling.
I would say it might, and I don't want to like, this horse might be dead already, but
Yeah.
it might make more sense to make Potterstone yellow and Churchwood yellow, and say, these are traditional, they're not changing.
Yeah.
And then focus on, more of the infill areas around
Yeah,
that.
that is fine, yeah. I could see how that would make sense.
And I guess 6-1, half dozen other, maybe.
Well, I don't know. I mean, I appreciate the point of homogeneity, Kyle, excuse me, Commissioner Shipp, but I don't want it in any of these neighborhoods that have close proximity to services, groceries, et cetera. I don't want to in any way stifle or discourage mother-in-law suites in the backyard.
Oh, definitely, yeah.
And to the extent that this is, it's got the word infill in there.
Mhm.
And there are still a few vacant lots in these neighborhoods, very few, but
I think, one other way to describe it is, there could be a Potterstone or Chatham Forest on the edges of the traditional neighborhood infill area, kind of as a transition to a single family. And then likewise on the residential, in the more parts of new subdivisions there might look like a Chatham Forest or even be a little bit more dense and then transition out. Because this is really looking at the character in general. So you take 100 acres, this is looking like what's the predominant field, predominant use, right? So you can have, some areas that look a little denser in kind of the residential area. And you can have some areas that are kind of on the, small, medium lot, single family home side of things, with some open space here and there, in the traditional neighborhood, as a existing subdivision or as a transition to what comes next.
Yeah, I don't think it's a big deal either way. Maybe this discussion was enough for future people to find on YouTube. But I think one other kind of area I wanted to focus on was the mixed use activity center at 87 and 64 bypass and that offset. So I know, your response to my comment was that there's already a neighborhood, or seems a large lot neighborhood on that southwest side.
Yeah.
But I think we should, in the name of density, essentially, we should take advantage of that intersection that's there. I think particularly on the north side of 64. And if this were, first of all, it looks a little strange to me that it's offset, that we'd be kind of pushing more into that ex-Campbell neighborhood, essentially, as this is drawn here. But I think that intersections are hard to get, or interchanges are hard to get, I think, and we should take advantage of what we have, but also make a distinction that is what we just want a red dot there, and we don't want commercial development to continue down 87. We don't want anything else besides conservation continuing up 87. Because I think that would still, it was listed on the commercial suitability map. That area is not listed on the natural resource area map right there. But I think if we sort of centered that dot, and I think I've seen it centered and I've seen it off, throughout the different drafts. So I'm curious to hear what the advisory, had about this, but I think that would help us say, yes, this is where we want things we don't want other places. And that makes most sense for, transit oriented development and things like that in this area, but utilize the four, corners essentially as much as possible of that interchange.
Well, I can give you kind of backstory on why it's where it is, but then there's some options, So, there is on the southern side of 87, there is a low density subdivision there that takes up a good part of what would be prime real estate. There's a little sliver up against the highway there But that property is bisected by a creek, which reduces the developable area significantly. So, that makes that intersection with Ex Campbell attractive, at least on this side of 64. I think there probably are some questions, and Mr. Jackson might be able to solve it, how hard it would be to serve the west side of 64 with water and sewer, and whether it would be worthwhile for some commercial. You might have to have a substantial development there in order to pay for, boring under the highway and get the sewer over there. So that's why it's where it is. Understanding it would be on the smaller end just because of those constraints that I listed, and not as big as some other areas. But with that being said, these circles are meant to be kind of conceptual. They're not meant to be the exact extent of all commercial development near those identified mixed use activity centers. So, it would be room for interpretation for whether something on the west side would be appropriate as it is. But if you would like it to be centered directly on 64 and 87, that we certainly could shift it. But know that there's, that's why I ended up where it was.
So there's some practical constraints and considerations as to why it was offset. And yet here we are trying to create a land use plan that's more conceptual and policy focused. So,
I think there are some big questions about sewer service
Sure.
in that area. Do we have enough capacity? Will we have enough capacity, even with upgrades to, serve that whole area, the ETJ west of 64? I think that fundamentally was an unknown that we were not able to answer at this particular moment in time. And if you look at the infrastructure section, there are some recommendations as to, updating this when the sewer picture becomes more clear, when we know, how much capacity we really will have, because there's that question, what happens, up 87 west of 64, there's the whole southwestern area. And, will we have capacity to serve with public sewer? There's like 3 basins there basically. And, with each basin, that's, we haven't run the numbers exactly, but it's a significant amount of potential residential development that we would have to be able to, process.
So I'll interject a thought here. I think that, the new land use plan map should be or can be and probably should be important tool for some of our negotiations with Sanford as far as the utility merger, where it relates to capacity. Certainly, you point out a great point as far as our current status as far as capacity. So that's kind of a different subject. I think the physical part of the infrastructure, I think there's a concept that can be imagined for, how we make something on the north side of 64 work. I think, there's some things going on in that, kind of corridor that, might support the infrastructure need, but the capacity need, certainly we would have to address with Sanford.
I think that it's a good point about utility service that I didn't think of, and that it's sort of a satellite out there it'd be slower to get public utilities, I think, than other areas.
And there's ways you can do it. There's, at the interchange, there could be a solution, but also, there's a, tributary that comes up the backsides of those properties. So, if you serve that area, it makes sense to serve the whole area, right? Not just, ideally you would not have a force main under the highway. You would have, gravity sewer for the whole basin. But again, this is getting the kind of utility service issues, which is a little bit outside of, but we had to look about it and think about it, but there's some unanswered questions there.
Yeah, okay.
Any additional questions? If not, go forward, please.
And that's the whole of the presentation, and just Q&A. And if you have any other questions, I'm happy to answer. Otherwise, I think ideally we would look for approval with, changes, or direct staff to make edits and bring it back to you next month. Those are kind of the three options.
Okay, any additional questions at this time? I'm sure you will have some later on, though. Thank you. Do we have any comments from any public? No one for the public hearing? Ms. Phelps, did you want to say, add anything?
Yeah, it's just, I'll kind of piggyback off of when Jake first started. We're just really thankful that we were able to work with them and have them develop the plan. It's been a lot of discussions, a lot of meetings, but they've all been very profitable, and we've had a lot of input from the community as far as the surveys. I mean, our population with the town and ETJ is just over 7,000, and we had 530 responses, over 530. So the community was involved. And it's just been a long time. I'm tired of extending the deadline for it. And, we'd like to have a decision either tonight or at the next one, if you need to still discuss it, which is fine. But just wanted to thank them for all the hard work they put in.
Thank you very much. So now we actually need a motion to close the public hearing.
So moved.
All in favor?
Aye.
Thank you, thank you. So at this time, we're going to go forward with the old business, unless you all wanted to vote on that today. Does anyone feel like they can vote on that tonight?
I think so. I mean, I've followed this process, but all the way through, and appreciate all the input and stuff that we've had on it. And the limited delays overall to get the good product. I've told a lot of people, like, this is largely originally why I ended up on the board, is because of the outdated plan. So I'm excited to see this. And I think that the important thing to remember for me too is that it's abstract and it's a guide going forward. So I think it's important to have it updated, and then to continue to look for updates and continue to update the UDO and align and things like that. But I'd be very happy to make a motion to approve.
Okay.
Second.
Okay.
Commissioner Shipp and Commissioner Farrell, would you be open to the edits that the presenters had offered themselves? There were some changes.
I think, sure, like with the updates I suggested for like names and.
They
things
were
like
in writing on the PowerPoint.
Yes, with
Okay.
updates as indicated.
Okay, and
Corrections.
could we also go ahead and change the color of the Chatham Forest to the same color as the Putterstone?
Any other concerns? Changes?
I'll just make a comment, Madam Mayor, that Janie does a really great job on this, because when I came on board, I think we were just starting that land use, and this is a much better and easier to maneuver than that. And thank y'all very much.
Yes.
You're here.
Yes, thank you all. We do appreciate it. Even though I was on the other one, I left with that one. I will admit that in 2012.
Well, I think if we wait 13 years or whatever to update this one, then we're in trouble too. So
Well,
it's not the product at the time. It's the length of time to update.
yes, so hopefully we will be updating this more often with changes. So thank you all so much again. We do appreciate, and the public, we certainly appreciate that, because that was,
We're not changing the adjustment, we're not adding an adjustment.
Correct.
Okay.
Correct.
okay.
And Commissioner Shipp, if you'll make clear those friendly amendments.
Yeah, so I think I'll make the motion to approve with the, I'll call them corrections noted in my comments, and then changing Chatham Forest to the infill category.
Thank you. Call the
Who
question.
was going to second it? Who said, you need to second
I'll
it?
second.
Okay.
Second.
All in favor?
All right,
Aye.
Okay, motion passed.
all right. I feel like applauding.
Good job, good job. So let's move
And to
forward.
the many volunteers as well. I think we
Yes,
need to,
yes.
Acknowledge public input and the committee.
I think I did earlier,
Yeah.
because from what you were indicating, there was a lot of individuals from the public that took part, and that is very, very important for the public to take part like that. And those individuals who were on the committee, I certainly do appreciate all the time and effort they put into this, because actually, land use plan is not an easy task. It is a lot to review and a lot of things to do. So we do appreciate all the time that the volunteers that put in for that. So we'll move forward now with the old business, which is Town of Pittsboro System Development Fee Ordinance. Mr. Jackson.
Okay, yes, thank you, Mayor Pro Tem. As we know, going back to December, we have been evaluating first an SDF fee update analysis, and more recently, consideration, discussion about setting a system development fee, an updated system development fee. If you'll recall, at the March 27th meeting, we had a extended discussion and public hearing to consider setting a fee. We talked about a number of the questions that had been raised throughout the different meetings. And we saw some comparisons of neighboring jurisdictions and their fees and how those apply to different project types in Pittsboro. And so tonight we bring an opportunity to consider adopting and setting a new system development fee for the town. As we have worked through this, staff felt that it was a good approach to offer the board a higher fee option and a lower, more moderate fee option for a couple of reasons. We had the analysis that was completed by Freeze and Nichols that set what our maximum fee that can be charged. So that's really the backup that we have is an analysis for maximum fee, which was just over $39,000 combined per service unit. We've heard a number of considerations along the way and have received input from a number of different sources. A couple of those being the city of Sanford, as it relates to a potential merger and the funding necessary to support the major utility projects that have been discussed in a number of meetings. We have also heard in public comment, and both at the hearing and through comments received online, the input from the development community and the potential impact and reverberations for what fee we ultimately, the board ultimately chooses to set. And staff has also sought advice from subject matter experts with UNC School of Government. As part of this process, trying to examine and flesh out as many different perspectives and considerations as we could as we brought this along. So what we have placed before you tonight, as I said, are a high option and a low option. And so the high option, which we're showing in Exhibit B1, would result in a combined system development fee for water and wastewater of $26,353.50 per service unit. So a fee in this range is leaning more toward the funding needed to support the major capital projects, water and sewer, that we have talked about that are primarily associated with a potential merger with the city of Sanford. And so the approach there was to re-examine the capital improvement plan that was provided by Freeze and Nichols and take a very narrow approach to that as had been advised and filter out some projects that were not as clear in the foreseeable future. And so that's how we arrived at the high option. And Exhibit B2 is what we are calling the low option. For the low option, we would have a combined system development fee of $10,638 combined for water and wastewater. This more reflects a system development fee that is in line with the examples that we saw of the neighboring jurisdictions that the town studied. One other thing I'd like to share with you before we discuss this. We did go back and examine, as we had on the March 27th meeting, applying these recommended options, high and low options, to the sample projects that we discussed on March 27th. And so this is the example for single family dwelling, 3-bedroom, 360 gallons per day service unit with a 3/4 inch meter. So you can see our maximum SDF was 39,238 per the Freeze and Nichols analysis. And so this graph, shows nicely how the high option and the low option, would stack up in comparison to the other jurisdictions that we studied. So with that, I'm happy to answer any questions that you might have or provide any additional information.
Can you click through the other?
Sure. So as I said, this is the single family example. We also looked at a car wash, which a car wash is it's a typical service in a community for sure. With as far as system development fees, it is somewhat of a unique use to evaluate. We also looked, if you'll recall, at the proposed YMCA out at Chatham Park. We also looked at the proposed Hampton Inn that's under construction. We also looked at the Lowe's Food that is under construction, nearing completion.
And those are all hypotheticals. So do I remember that right?
Well, those are, they were hypothetical in a sense in our earlier discussions. However, this graph is showing applying the actual recommended SDFs to those projects. So now these projects would not be impacted because they've already paid their fee. So it's hypothetical in that sense.
Okay, yeah, that's what I meant.
Commerce Center out at Chatham Park is another non-residential example. And for a residential multifamily example, we looked at the Northwood Landing Apartments. So, an interesting this thing to look at with that is the apartment project has 312 units. So with the proposed 734,020 low option, that will result in a If you broke it out into a per apartment type basis, that would be something over $2,300 per apartment unit. So that has no basis really in the analysis. It's just an interesting kind of averaging.
You say
observation.
about 2,300 for the low option.
Correct.
Any questions for Mr. Jackson? Comments?
Yeah, I guess a comment. I just want to say like this, I appreciate the comparison to the nearby municipalities because it's a market reality. But our infrastructure costs are unrelated to nearby municipalities. So that's what makes it difficult is that we have these costs that we need to cover. And maybe the other municipalities don't have these costs yet, or they had them, earlier or whatever that is. But it's a market reality that we need to stay near to them, but it doesn't cover all of our costs that we have either. Without, so grants and other things are what are the only thing that will help us there. And then just the way that the rates work out compared to others, it seems like we're, I'll say penalizing, but that's not the right word, but there's a bigger impact on commercial development than residential development. We seem more in line with the apartments and with the single family homes, but this would, based on the multiplier, this would put us, quite a bit higher on commercial development, which is something that we're trying to incentivize. But I don't know that we can do anything about that necessarily. Just an observation.
I like to combine the number of 20,000. Just say.
So Commissioner Shipp, I will at least partially in response to your observation, which or comment, which is very valid. If you'll recall, there were some other formulae that we had seen that were more complex, I would say, that maybe included a meter size component and a square footage component and potentially even a use component.
Right.
So, I mean, though, we do not know why those were developed in the way that they were. It's reasonable to think it could have been in response to what you're pointing out, how it, disproportionately impacts non-residential.
I'm not sure that it's disproportionate either, because again, we're comparing to other municipalities, which is not correct, other than for the market itself, which is a reality. But it may not be disproportionate to the cost that we have for our system. But I think it's correct that if we wanted to change that methodology, we need to redo the study and re-advertise and go through those steps again, correct? If we would say we're not charge by square footage and meter size for commercial. Or
we have not asked that question of Freeze and Nichols, so we would need to ask that question. My initial thought is that may not be the case.
Can't, whatever SDF we decide on, are we able to amend that at any time? Or is it I'm just gonna use this example, if we use the low option, which I'm really satisfied with, the high option just really seemed out there as the the recommendation that frees the nickel at 39,000. But is it a possibility if we do this merger and we have water and sewer, that we can change this SDF fee? Or can we amend it at any time to change the fee?
I may let Paul speak about that, but as far as I know, as far as are we allowed to? I believe that we are allowed to.
Yes, you may have to have a public hearing, change the fee. You do it in the budget. Typically, that's what you have done in the past, is adopted the SDF fee in the budget. But if you didn't do it then, you could do it like we've done here. You can have another public hearing, it's that way, as long as you don't go over that maximum.
Right.
Report. Now, after merger, we can't do it. It's not going to be your SDF.
Mhm.
Examples SDF. Involved discussions about the town's role in that process. But that's to be determined too.
And where does Sanford stand with our SDFs? Have we heard anything back from them?
We have not asked them specifically for input on this information this evening. However, we have had conversations along the way that letting them know we are working toward this. Kind of in summary, their feedback has been, encouraging us toward a fee that fully supports the cost of those major utility projects, which would be a fee that is closer to the maximum fee.
Their interest has been the ability to charge a fee for Pittsboro that would not necessarily be the same fee as charged to the customers.
Right.
Yep.
Sir.
We think they can. Okay. But that would allow Pittsboro's SDF fee to be much higher than Sanford's, as it will be with either one of those.
Right.
Correct.
Do we have a timeline on when we can amend our SDFs? We want to look back this, whatever we vote on today, if we decide in 1 year we want to change them, is a year possible?
Sure. I think a month is possible.
Yes.
Right? I think we can
Yes.
set a public hearing and change it. I don't think we want to change it a lot, but I think we kind of talked before about sort of a correction type adjustment, and then seeing if we can get more information, use other methods, do other things. But I think stability of the SDF is somewhere near the importance of the level of the SDF for people trying to plan developments.
And can we dwell for a few minutes here on the question of affordable housing and equity? Mr. Jackson, do you have any thoughts just from that prompt?
Sure. So in our conversations with the school government representative, we articulated, the board's, interest or question about how to address affordable housing. And the clear response that we received is that there are measures that the board can choose to take to offset these system development fees when they are due for an approved affordable housing unit.
Only for an approved affordable housing or in advance?
Well, for an affordable housing unit, that would be, affordable housing units are not generally defined in any one definition, but it would be an affordable housing project that fit the board's, goals for an affordable housing unit.
And can any of the staff help me recall the name of the Habitat for Humanity project that's been proposed off Tumor Loop?
Robert's
I
Run.
believe it's called Robert's Run.
Okay, and the number of units in that? Wanted to say it was 20. but
It's smaller. It's a smaller project, maybe 40 or less.
Oh, 40, okay. I think I heard it had changed from first submittal to more recent conversations. You know, I'm just so mindful of the fact that we don't have any sewer capacity. We won't have any sewer capacity until the force main turns on. And so any of our considerations about market, I mean, are they even relevant? Or are they moot?
If we're gonna change the price between now and then anyway, or there's a good chance that we are, I think.
But not
No.
in the sense of if you establish the SDF fee, even though there's no new development that's going to likely to occur, it still is important from the term, in terms of preparing the feasibility study, that we'll be able to show that we can afford to pay for the infrastructure that's going to be needed for any other development.
Mhm,
And there is development happening in Pittsboro now
mhm.
that's at least paying one side of the system development fee.
Mhm. Okay, right. Water.
So basically, we do need to decide about this system development fee. Certainly, we're not going to go with the 39,000. I think that would be just a bit much to start with. I think that would be, if there's been, I think Mr. Commissioner Vose said 20. Commissioner Farrell, you were thinking around 10 or 17?
I'm still dwelling
Still.
on that issue right now.
Okay.
I appreciate, Mr. Jackson, your rationalization, the detailed calculations behind the 26,553 is based on realities that we're currently facing. Is that right?
That's right. And it's also based on, as I said, some of the information we received from the resource at the UNC School of Government, put an emphasis on, what projects are foreseeable.
Okay.
Which,
So it's a little bit more than just the force main and the headworks and the water pipeline.
right.
Okay.
So as I was saying, an emphasis on what is foreseeable, and then interpreting the general statute language very narrowly as it reads is really kind of what went into informing the high option.
Mhm. I feel like the conservative approach here is to set the high option. Because we don't have any assurance that the low option is going to cover the costs that we know we're investing in.
Hmm.
Is that an accurate statement?
I mean, I think the conservative option is to set it to 39,000, the maximum that's
Thank you.
indicated.
I didn't want to say that.
But it's not possible. So like, I think there's a concept of a ramp here, so to speak. It's like when it's similar to what we do with water rates. Like, we recognize they needed to be higher, but there's just an economic reality that we can't make as big of jump as we need. We can't make up our deficit of utility projects in the next year. And so with not having made raises over time, we've got to be a little bit stepwise about our raises. Because I think if we were to go from around 4,000 today or something to, 26,000, it would likely stop projects that are ongoing in Pittsboro. And so then we're actually not generating any revenue because there won't be anything built. So I mean, there's got to be something, there's got to be we got to warm the pot up with the lobster in it. I guess.
It has to be some medium for that.
It does, but it's an abstract number that we're going to pick. It doesn't mean that it's going to cover these projects. It just means that we know we need to be with what we need to know now, we need to be at 39,000, but we just can't do it. So we've got to just decide what we think is a step in that direction. And then, make a plan for reevaluation, whether that's what we hear about a grant application or something like, if we apply for a grant and we don't get it, or if we get construction costs back for when we rebid the force main and they come back a lot higher or a lot lower, then we can kind of adjust from there. But I think I think we've got to think of this as a correction for some of the past, but it's, we charge $30 for a hot dog, but we're not going to get any money for it, So.
Do we have a number on the habitat?
Yes, 19.
Okay, great. So that's reminiscent of a number that Commissioner Shipp, you and I were talking about. Mr. Jackson, you had expressed, I guess, some optimism about the idea that we might have a more complicated formula without having to recreate the whole study. Is it possible that you could get a firm answer on that before the next meeting?
Yes, and as we've been discussing, Heather has advised me that we would most likely need to revisit the process to change the formulary. In other words, to work in a square footage component or a use component. She feels that we would need to at least partially reconduct the study. So,
we would need to reconstruct the study.
yes, so we would want to confirm that with Freeze and Nichols prior to confirming that that's an option. I will add that. So we have drafted this with a effective date of May 1st. As we sit, it would not change the numbers. But if we felt that a kind of longer landing strip, so to speak, were helpful, that date could certainly be adjusted with no other implications.
So perhaps a June 1st?
Yes, or later if the board saw fit.
I think I'd be in favor of going towards the lower side as soon as possible. And then looking out further at, any things we can do for commercial or other things, but making that correction soon. And then, maybe planning on an update in August or something like that.
So what figure are you thinking?
What's this low number here? I think 11,000 even to make it easy and clear that it's just the number we picked out of the range.
Any other suggestions or Discussion on that?
I can support that.
So do you want to make that in form of a motion?
One question from Mr. Jackson. Kent, if we go back to the square footage, and I assume that would that separate residential from commercial? Paying the square footage, would be meter plus square footage.
As far as I know, that formula could be applied to either in the examples we have seen, it is more commonly applied to non-residential.
Oh, okay,
Uses.
not residential would just be a flat 3/4 meter.
Right.
Okay. Okay, gotcha.
I think it could depend though, if we look at it, I mean, there's a reason that was applied to commercial, and a 3/4 meter could serve a wide variety of homes, just like can serve a wide variety of businesses. So
You're saying square footage on residential also?
we might be able to, if we can do it with our current study on commercial, we might be able to do it on residential, or if we need to restudy and we desire that, then we could ask them to look at that.
What's the start of our fiscal year?
July 1.
I'm going to suggest we go with July 1 and Commissioner Shipp, friendly amendment rather than 11. I appreciate the poetry of a random or arbitrary number, but I think we ought to stick with the staff number because of the calculations behind that, and have 10,638 combined SDF. Starting at the beginning of the fiscal year.
I mean, Kent, maybe you can remind us what the calculations are based on, but I'm not sure it's that specific.
I think it's too low. I think we should ask for half of the high number, and I still think that's a little irresponsible. If we're being told what the number is that we need, and that's what we need. So I think starting with half that number still seems like a pretty good concession.
Commissioner Vose, I'm
That's my thought.
I'm very sympathetic to your point. As I said before, I think the conservative way about this is to set this high and then go low, test the market, see how it responds. But I don't think we have broad support for the higher number. Maybe we do.
I'm just suggesting half of the higher number.
Just
At
20,000.
20, well,
In terms of parking lot math, yeah.
yeah, but
Oh, you're talking about
again,
half of the maximum, not half of the.
parking lot math. I'd rather go with staff's math just to make it easier for them, but
So what's the pleasure of the board?
I mean, I'll just say, I mean, my big concern is that we can't make up for all of our past transgressions, in one loop. And it's not all past transgressions either. We've had, construction costs just be completely unexpected. Otherwise, we would have started already on those projects. So, I mean, I don't think we can make up for all of that. And I appreciate, Kent, what you said about, there's got to be a reality of projects on the horizon to support this. And even at 10,638, that's, higher than almost everywhere around us. So if somebody's looking to build a new development or a new grocery store in, if they're looking right now between Pittsboro and Fuquay, what we decide tonight can make that could be the tipping factor for, commercial development, for residential development, any of that. And I think that, this has to get us to additional capacity. And we have to assume that we're going to figure out the capacity, get these projects started. And then now is when projects would start, going through the process for approval to be ready when the fourth main is ready, ideally. So, what we decide to say that we'll go high to test the market, I don't think that we as government don't move that fast to see what the market does and then adjust. We're not going to know. They're just not going to come. So I think we need to go on the lower side just because it has been so low. And we're, creating a number to stay in the competition essentially.
Couple other things I'll just interject for your thinking. If you'll recall from the freeze study, 43% of the jurisdictions surveyed did not adopt the maximum fee. Number one. Also, we are in the 5th year since the SDF law came in. So many jurisdictions will be going through this process, in the coming months. And so, it's been, accurately and well stated that comparison does not have bearing on the fee that we set. But as far as informational, that will be occurring over the next several months. So.
And given inflation, it's a pretty safe bet that they will be going up.
And I think we have the opportunity to adjust up towards our maximum if we see that these jurisdictions start going up also. But it's a bit of a, I don't know. But I mean, if somebody's planning to build a house today and it's a $4,000 cost and we change it to a $20,000 cost, that could likely affect, if they're going to build that house or particularly where they're going to build it if we make such a large change. Or open a business.
I think also, given, the landscape and the history of, the precursor, the impact fees, certainly jurisdictions are not required in any way to act, together or in coordination as far as this issue is concerned. But it's one of the many issues that there may be benefit to sharing information and, being very aware of what, others are doing.
I think there's another reality here that you mentioned the impact fees that then got changed to SDF fees by the legislature and those who lobby them. So the more out of line, maybe this is with other jurisdictions, it may endanger our ability to recoup costs. If the legislature changes their mind about what we're allowed to do.
Oh,
Well, basically, we can set it at a specific rate now, and then we can always do that study, which you were referring to, have another study, and then we could look at those fees again and increase them if we need to accordingly. So,
remind the board of the cost of the SDF study. Approximately.
Yeah, I mean, we did it as an amendment off of the we originally had the SDF CIP and rate analysis that was combined, I think, 125,000, 140,000. So we rolled the rate analysis part of that into the merger. So I think that left the SDF part of this under 100,000. I think for the CIP and the SDF, we were in the $75,000 range.
And I'm sure it was a good bit of work for the staff to feed that study. To provide Freeze and Nichols for all they needed.
I mean, well, especially early on, there were a lot of data requests that required considerable staff time.
I don't think it's a new study. I think it'd be essentially an amendment to this study if we're going to change the charging method. You know, we have the information to back it up. If we want to say, we would like to charge commercial by meter size and square footage, I think that's an amendment to this study that wouldn't have a significant cost.
Yeah, I think
We
that's
probably
great.
have to
I think that's a great
re-advertise.
I'd be very surprised if they were not receptive to that concept.
Okay, so what is the pleasure of the board?
I'll make a motion to set the combined total per service unit for system development fees of 11,000 on July 1st.
I'm just gonna say that I still think it's too low. We talk about development paying for itself. Here's a chance to do something with those words. I think 11,000 is just not what we need.
I think it's too low for the need, and I think it's almost too high for the market. So I think that's where we gotta.
I'll just add a footnote to that we would assume that we would use the same percentages to apply that between water and wastewater.
Yes. Yes. Right.
Is there a second?
I'll second.
So, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
All opposed?
I really appreciate Commissioner Shipp. You've offered the very own amendment or motion that I suggested, and I'm reluctant. But based on the likelihood that we can revisit this, and that we're all open to revisiting this, won't cost us anything more than another hearing and time on the agenda if we decide we need to raise it. I'll go with the vote tonight. My signing note is that I'm very sympathetic to the arguments that Commissioner Vose has made and believe that we needed to do higher. So to the extent that staff might consider that in the future.
I think affordable housing is an issue for us to consider before we go higher also, what we can do specifically around that.
So from what I'm hearing, there's 3 yays and 1 no. So the motion passes with the 11,000 as the system development fees. It's starting on July 1st, 2023. And then we will also have Freeze and Nichols. I'm sorry.
I think you need to.
I need to vote. Okay. I vote yay. So 4 yay then and 1 no. So basically, but the motion passes. And also we will be asking Freeze and Nichols to do to amend the study to look at the meter size and square footage.
I think that would be a separate motion. And I will make that motion.
Okay,
I would offer an amendment, I guess, to say,
Okay.
to look at, to that motion, to look at, the cost of commercial versus the cost of residential. And I don't want to prescribe the method, you know, of that, because some of those were use-based, some of them were square footage based, some of them were other things, maybe. But, you know, that we have a equitable cost distribution between types of commercial, I guess. I don't know if that's.
Okay, so can you please restate the motion? For clarification.
I'll interject. It may be helpful to state that in kind of a sense of to evaluate that by a certain date or by, you know, certain number of months or something, so that we are not, so that it doesn't seem too specific of what we're requesting.
So that it doesn't seem too specific.
Right, or so that it's clear that we are stating this as a future evaluation or follow-up or amendment.
Separate from this action.
Right.
Yes.
Okay.
That's my intent.
Let me see. I guess I would just say is look at alternative methods we could use for commercial, in addition to just by meter size. By July 1st.
Is that your motion?
Yes.
Okay, is there a second?
John's.
I'll second it.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Guess I vote. Okay, thank you all very much. So next we'll move on to our new business, which is the American Rescue Plan Act by Morgan DeWitt.
Good evening. So the North Carolina Division of Water Infrastructure is having their spring round for stormwater planning and infrastructure grants. And the town proposes to submit 2 applications for the stormwater planning grant. The first is for Town of Pittsboro Stormwater Master Plan. The town currently does not have a stormwater master plan. So this would consist of an asset inventory and assessment of all of our stormwater infrastructure and include a capital improvement plan for how we can make those improvements in the foreseeable future. The second application that we're preparing is for the final design and estimate for 3 culvert replacements on Oakwood Drive. So this has historically been an area with high flooding issues, and years ago there was a feasibility study done that the town did to show that these 3 culverts needed to be upsized. So we're just trying to pursue the next step in that process by getting a final design and hopes to obtain funding for construction in the future. So we are asking the board tonight to approve a resolution to apply for these 2 applications.
Morgan DeWitt, I'm in support of both of these initiatives. I'm a little bit curious. I apologize if it was in the documents. I didn't drill down that low, but would the Oakwood Drive project involve a significant amount of road uplift? I don't know how any other way to describe it than that.
We're not at that point yet to really know.
Okay.
It would just be the design phase. So we don't have a design at this
The
point.
design will tell us that.
Right.
Very good. Thank you.
What's the cost breakdown between the 2? I saw they were combined 400.
Right,
but-
so one municipality is cut off at $400,000. So we're looking at $300,000 for the stormwater master plan and $100,000 for the design for the culvert replacement. That may change a little bit before we submit, but it'll probably be relatively close to the $300,000 and the $100,000.
Okay. And this is unrelated to stormwater, but I assume we're also submitting for wastewater and drinking water projects this round.
So we have an item to talk about that later.
You're gonna hit that later. Okay.
And Ken, I have just one quick, and Morgan, thank you. Does this have anything to do with the elementary drive coverage we was talking about last week, 2 weeks ago?
I don't think this one does. I think
That's a
we,
separate grant.
Okay, okay. So it's under different grants, okay.
yeah,
Thank
but you did approve
Right.
something for that recently.
That's- But I thought that the Oakwood Drive was on that grant.
So the one for Pittsboro Elementary School Road is through the Golden Leaf Foundation.
That's right.
And they're
that's right.
offering the construction funding, but DWI this round is only offering planning funding.
Okay.
So that's why we submitted the Pittsboro Elementary School Road to that.
Gotcha. Thank you. Thanks for clarification.
Okay, thank you very much, Ms. DeWitt. Also, I'm sort of concerned about flooding in other areas, which is on 15501, about, yeah, it floods quite a bit. And it's within the city limits. So where I'm thinking is over at the apartments that are up on the hill, 15501, and it's, as I said, within the city limits. And it's
North of town, Hillsborough Street.
right, Hillsborough Street, all of that, starting before you get to what used to be. I'm trying to see if I can describe the Cooper Brothers before you get to that particular service area. So what used to be a service station. It actually floods really, really bad, that the water goes over 15501 and can be quite treacherous. So I was wondering if that also could be one that can be looked at later on.
Yeah, that definitely could. The stormwater master plan will help us identify all those areas townwide and how we can prioritize those.
Okay.
And
Because
I think,
that's. go
I
ahead,
think
I'm
the
sorry.
widening project should
Well,
not make that worse. Hopefully it will
I
correct it.
I hope, but we'll see.
Yeah.
Might
But
touch a few of those culverts.
Mhm.
I hope. Yes, okay, thank you. So basically, I just wanted to make you aware of that. So basically, we need a motion or recommendation.
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
All right.
All right.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Yes, you again. Ms. Stewart, I think that's you again.
Yeah, I think I'm just gonna-
Okay.
Yeah, so this is, we're bringing to you tonight the last section of our redoing all of our engineering specifications and standard details. So this is section 1, and it pretty much just wraps up all the technical sections that you previously approved. And it just outlines the process for any commercial or residential development that comes in. Once you get through the planning process, when it gets to engineering, as far as what's required within your submittal and how it's approved, how it's constructed and inspected. And then once it's completed, the requirements that the town has before we will accept it. So this includes public utilities, roadway infrastructure, sidewalks, anything that's engineering or utility related.
I just a question about this. I see the 1-year warranty period, and I think with the ongoing sort of nature of construction in some of these areas, I think that 2 years would be more appropriate, and that if it's built correctly, I don't think it's an issue either way, but that might show us some of the faults if there is one over that time. Is that restricted, I guess, of what we can do in that?
I don't think there's a restriction or a statute that holds us to the 1-year warranty period that I'm aware of. That's something to add on that.
It's mostly unusual. Year is normal.
Okay.
I guess it depends on what kind of security that the town might have for the 1 year. It's been minimal.
So we do have some projects right now. The way it is written, it's no less than 1 year. So we do have some now that are close to 1.5 years still under the warranty period, but they just haven't met the requirements that we're holding them to do the final acceptance.
Okay.
So it could go over just depending on the parameters of the project. And if there's, right now, the biggest thing is we're requiring them to replace things and there's a delay on materials. And so we've held off final acceptance for reasons like that. But our previous specs and also some that our neighboring jurisdictions have, they also have the 1 year warranty period as well.
Okay. And I guess I would defer to staff. I mean, do you feel that that covers us for defects?
Can add on it, that I feel like if the town is not going to accept it right at the 1 year if they haven't met all of our requirements.
That's right. I think a couple other things to keep in mind. The bond is, is equally critical part of that. Making sure that we have bonds or security instruments that have automatic renewal clauses. So that, if there's any administrative glitch in tracking those, we don't, end up with a bad outcome. Also recall in the UDO, we last year, or it may have been in 21, late in 21, we increased the performance requirement from 40% of the required improvements to 75% of the required improvements. So if we were to start experiencing issues, we could look to those two features as well to give us a little more security.
And does this have the language that you're looking for about the bonds and renewal? And things like
Yes.
that? Okay.
Is there a motion to approve the recommendation update?
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Thank you. Ms. DeWitt, for you again.
Last one. So the EPA has recently changed their lead and copper rule. So with that, they're requiring all municipalities to locate any public utilities that they have. So for water that have lead or copper in them. And we're also supposed to, as part of that, we're supposed to provide outreach and awareness to the community to explore the private side and see if they have any lead or copper in their public utilities. So as part of this rule that the EPA is pushing, so the town of Pittsboro is required to locate all of our lead and copper water lines and fittings and any kind of pieces that go with those by October of 2024. And once they're located, we have to put together a replacement plan. And that's a federal requirement. So as part of that, we did do the asset inventory and assessment for our water system. We finished up in 2021. With that, we had about 1,300 different segments that the material was considered unknown. But you can kind of approximate based on like the development around it, like about what decade it is, what the material might be. The EPA considers anything unknown as having lead and copper in it. So we're going to have to further our study by doing an actual analysis of all of those segments to prove if it is lead or copper in that. So as part of that, the town is applying for a grant application to obtain funding to do this study. And it's also through DWI in the spring round. So we're here tonight to ask for approval of a resolution to submit a grant application so we can move forward with the lead and copper analysis.
Barring any questions, I move for approval of the resolution.
Yeah.
All in favor? Aye. Thank you very much. Thank you. We'll move forward to water treatment updates, Mr. Jackson.
Okay, thank you, Mayor Pro Tem. So we also have Corey Salisbury here with us tonight, our water plant superintendent. So he'll be talking about some parts of this. So the first part kind of addresses one of Commissioner Shipp's questions about our proposal for grant applications or SRF loan applications for spring 2023. In the fall of 2022 that were announced in February of this year, we did receive 2 additional SRF loans for our advanced treatment efforts at our water treatment plant. A $5,680,000 SRF loan toward our continued PFAS treatment, our GAC system, which would allow us to fund phase 2 of that project. That loan comes with a 100% principal forgiveness. Also in that same round, we were awarded $12,224,000 for additional advanced treatment at our plant, initially focused on 1,4-dioxane treatment through a ultraviolet advanced oxidation process. More recently, with the Sanford merger discussions and the need to and plan to bring potable water into Pittsboro from the Sanford Water Plant Expansion Project, we have been having discussions with the Division of Water Infrastructure for the opportunity to use this $12 million loan toward the infrastructure to bring the water into Pittsboro, the transmission system. Those discussions have been going positively. We do not have a final approval on that, but the discussions have been positive. They have asked staff for a number of pieces of information to evaluate our request. So we're optimistic that that is within our reach. Kind of the intent behind that is Sanford does not have a known or reported 1,4-dioxane problem that has been detected and reported. And so the concept being that we can obtain additional water supply from a reliable and safe water source. So more information to come on that. So around that, there are kind of, I guess, 3 scenarios. So the better one, in staff's opinion, is that DWI continues working towards letting us use the $12 million loan toward the water transmission system. If they say no, then between now and May 1st, or actually between now and April 24th, Pittsboro and Sanford will decide which entity will make a new application to NCWI for their spring 23 drinking water construction loan program. So that's kind of the scenario with that effort. And kind of the last thing, and this is what Corey is going to help us fill in some information on, is back in March, EPA introduced draft maximum contaminant levels for PFOA and PFOS. And so Corey is going to talk about that.
How y'all doing?
Good.
Hey, Corey.
So March 29th, they did the final draft for the PFAS rule. And to set PFAS standards for the MCLs. They're hoping to have it late 2023 to early 2024 to have it finalized. With that rule, there are 2 main components, PFOA and PFOS. Those MCLs will be 4 parts per trillion. And then there's 4 more PFAS components that are the kind of like the smaller components, which is, I'm just going to do acronyms because they're a lot difficult. But PFNA, PFHXS, GenX, and PFBS. Those will be an average of 1 or below. And right now, as it stands with our GAC treatment, the PFOA, we are non-detect. PFOS, we have a 1.1. And the average of those 4 components were at a 0.0055. So we are well below the EPA standards that will be finalized by the end of the year.
Excuse me for interrupting, Court. So am I understanding you to say that we are testing at parts per trillion? Because I thought the labs weren't even able to attain that right now.
So, yeah, so that's so far, like I said, we've only had 1 email and 1 webinar about what's they're going to attain, but yeah, so it is parts per trillion is the standard.
Okay, and we're hitting it right now.
Oh, yeah.
Okay. That's very good, because I had misunderstood that our laboratories and others were not even able to achieve that level of measurement right now. And then I guess the next question is, once the carbon is saturated, and it needs to be replenished or recharged or whatever they call it when we pump it out and send it to Boston, what is that dynamic going to look like?
So we have not yet had to do that for us, and it'll probably be within the next couple of months. I'll have more information on that. And you know, with lead time, I'll have to have lead times and all that kind of stuff. So I don't really have too much information on that because we haven't had to do that yet.
Okay.
But I think functionally how that goes, and we're not without treatment during that time. It's just when we make the determination.
We're running 1 through 1 filter and having 1 in relay. And then once that one, we start seeing breakthrough through that one, we'll switch and then have that one offloaded and re-energized or what they do.
Yeah.
So essentially, I think these EPA limits would be our potentially new target for when we need to regenerate versus whatever we had said before.
I will add that on the subject of the disposal of the media, in some conversations last year, the city of Greensboro had indicated being receptive to at least sharing information, coordinating with us on the disposal issue. We've not had any follow-up discussions with them, but I do recall them saying that last year.
Meaning,
so knowing that this was just prior to our new GAC vessels opening, we had some representatives from Greensboro here, and we kind of touched on this unknown of disposal of the media, and they indicated a willingness and interest to cooperate and to the extent that we can on ways to do that, information sharing, resource sharing.
okay.
So nothing formal, but just a gesture.
Do they even have a GAC plant in operation?
I don't think they do at this time.
They have a
But-
trial plant.
Okay, so that they don't have routine
No.
service providers in this realm, so.
No, I think the
don't.
discussion was around there'd be more of a economy of scale once their system is operational, and then certainly once Sanford is
okay.
operational too. But
So Pittsboro is ahead of the game so far. And once it's approved, late 2023 to 2024, it'll be like a 3 to 5 year for a compliance deadline. So that'll give other municipalities to do pilot study, figure out what they're going to move is going to be. So Pittsboro is ahead of the game.
Yeah.
That
3 to 5 years plus whatever it takes them to finalize the rules.
Yeah.
Yeah, nice. We look good.
I think, Ken, since you brought it up too, I just want to highlight that partnership with Greensboro. It was a joint grant application that we put in to DWI they were a letter of support anyway for our grant application.
Yes.
That was successful for the PFAS treatment. So.
Thank you very much.
Yep, thank you, Lori.
Thank you. If there's not any additional questions or comments, let's move on to the miscellaneous, which is the Town of Pittsboro Water Conservation Policy. Mr. Jackson.
Okay, thank you again. So a couple of months ago earlier, there was interest expressed. I think this maybe came out of some of the projections actually from the SDF study perhaps. So there was clearly interest from the board to look into formalizing a water conservation policy as we move into the spring and certainly into the summer. And so staff has done some research, evaluated what we were able to find in our own records. We did not find anything tangible in the way of a policy that was previously adopted by the town. We did find staff work that had been completed toward that goal. So certainly that is a little bit of an education process for current staff. So feel free and add into that if you're aware of something that we had overlooked in that way. However, we have drafted a policy for your consideration. Some of the highlights of this policy we have included right in the beginning a portion to address irrigation. We have noticed in recent weeks an uptick in the number of irrigation applications that we are receiving. And so we have, kind of borrowed some best practices from local jurisdictions that are also in the Jordan Lake that get their drinking water from Jordan Lake and surrounding water bodies. This even and odd watering is a current best practice as it relates to irrigation. Other measures related to irrigation include the automatic controllers and moisture sensors, required on all irrigation systems, requiring shutoffs for any handheld watering hoses and so forth that might be used, prohibiting wasteful use of water. There's a provision for leaks to be repaired within 10 days upon being made aware of the leak. There are, of course, some exceptions to the policy. For instance, irrigation that's being used for the establishment of newly sited or seeded loans, which is typical in new home construction. During the first 30 days, there is a exemption that applies in that case, and a number of other kind of routine situations. Firefighting, of course, water for construction or maintenance where there's no practical alternative. In those cases, however, there is a requirement for that to be acknowledged and approved and not just pursued. So we did also include a kind of progressive penalty provision, a written warning for a first offense, progressing through to $500 penalty, $1,000 penalty, and in extreme cases, a provision for water service to actually be interrupted. So those are some of the highlights of it. certainly glad to discuss it in more detail or answer any questions that you might have.
So if I could just clarify, you're saying that you weren't able to find the 2016 water conservation policy?
Morgan, did you comment on what we found related to that?
So we could not find the actual policy itself or a draft of the policy. We just found some documents at board meetings that express that staff was working on a policy. We
Okay.
never actually found the draft.
I thought my notes were that we had approved it. So I'm gonna look
If you
back.
have any more information about that, then pass it on.
Thought we did. Because of the drought. Remember we were in a drought.
All right, I'm gonna look back at my notes.
Yeah, I thought that we had actually approved one because there was a drought and we had to put something in place. But I do not have, I'm sure I have it at home if we passed it.
Yeah.
But I would be unable
We
to.
have approved a shortage response plan.
Mhm.
So that may be what you may be approved.
Shorter response.
Was it in
time. I think
2016?
that was-
I'm not sure, but I know that's a.
That
general
could have been
practice.
it.
We have to have that. I know that we have done that in the past. I'm not sure.
We did pass something, but I'm not sure what it was. But I have a question about the penalties. Is it, the penalties, are they regarding if there's an emergency? Or is that just in general based on this policy, this conservation policy? Or is it for emergency type situations?
No, I mean, the penalties would be, so to speak, a normal course of the program. Where there had been a first offense that was noticed by a written warning that, would be acknowledged by the, by the user that had been in violation of the policy.
So I'll just use this as an example. It talks about automatic irrigation systems shall not apply more than 1 inch of water per week. So if you applied more than that, are you saying you're going to get a penalty?
Hypothetically, I think in, as kind of goes with general policies of this nature, the enforcement of a specific provision, certainly would be applied within reason, and as that relates to other requirements, so to speak, if they have automatic controllers and moisture sensors as required by the policy, and for some reason they are also applying more than 1 inch per week, consideration would be given for, they have the required equipment, but there's some, there's potentially some defect with the equipment they have had installed. So that's to say, I think a number of these, would be read and enforced together, and not in every case literally as it is written.
I think, Kent, like you were saying too, I mean, we don't realistically have the resources to enforce this, but it's essentially a tool for some of the more egregious instances, I
Right.
think. And to me, it's a big, really big education component to it, of letting people know what these are. Please adjust your, irrigation controllers to match this and things like that. And I think it's a capacity issue overall, like in a drought situation, but also with our, we're putting very good water out there on lawns right now. with our new treatment system. So I think overall, the conservation of that is good, but I don't expect that we're going to be proactively enforcing this just based on resources, essentially.
That's correct. And I think, Mayor Pro Tem, I may have missed one of your potential questions as well. You may have been asking, are we proposing these to be applied during kind of emergency or drought conditions where an emergency may have been issued by some public
Yes.
body?
Yes.
Or
that's-
are we proposing these for
Mhm.
normal, just, day-to-day operation? And our intent, these would be these would be for normal, day-to-day, water conservation,
Okay.
and not just for, so to speak, emergency
Mhm.
scenarios. These would hopefully help us, be more resilient if we had emergency type scenarios.
Okay. Yeah, I was just a little concerned for not just about the irrigation, but about the water leaks. Right, number 5, water leaks on property or facilities of town of Pittsboro customers shall be repaired within 10 days of the discovery. Some people don't know they have water leaks for months, unfortunately, until they get that
Sure.
bill.
Hmm.
So that was sort of one of my concerns. I wouldn't want them to have a leak and then the water bill is high and then they get a penalty of $500 per occurrence.
I think upon discovery is what, if they don't discover it until they get a bill,
Okay,
then that wouldn't have started a clock. And the first warning or first is written. Anyway.
Okay.
But I think to our staff would apply some discretion in those cases too, like that. But if it's somebody's watering every day at noontime,
mhm.
then, but I did have a question about, I don't know, I've never had irrigation, so I don't know how easy it is to add like a moisture sensor if you don't have one now. I mean, I think we could also say it's acceptable if you just don't water during the rain, however you accomplish that. And then it talks about like the water for washing vehicles, if it flows to the public right away or adjacent property. I think that could be largely topography dependent. If you have a steep driveway and you wash your car, it's going to go to the right of way. So I'm not sure what that, I understand not excessive quantities, but
Right.
sometimes it's going to go there. I don't know.
Yeah, and I'll just add, this is, and certainly we considering maybe nearly, nearly a final draft form, but certainly not presented in a final draft form. So, part of what we hoped for tonight was to get your feedback and comments so that we can take those under advisement and make any adjustments that you might be interested in seeing.
I think overall that it is a good policy in reference to what water conservation.
Hmm.
Any additional comments, discussion?
I agree. I think it's a good start, and we could see how it goes, and work on education and adjust as we need to.
Okay. Any additional concerns from the commissioners, comments? If not. then-
Are you
Oh,
talking
I'm
about
sorry.
this or generally?
Generally.
Okay. Yeah. I would like staff to look at our affordable housing incentives in the UDO, particularly around SDF, because I think we offer, one of them that we offer is a waiver of the SDF. So just what
Yeah.
sort of the financial implications of that
Mhm.
policy, particularly after July 1st. That makes sense. No, I mean, so, yes, okay.
Any additional concerns from other commissioners? If not, then we can call for a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
So, second.
All in favor?